odd wall of water as the river was drying up on one side and saying, we believe that God is doing this to allow us to cross through the Red Sea unharmed. Probably not. Our imagination speculate, right, that they were probably a little tentative to go in. But they were afraid of Pharaoh. And so it was because they were afraid of Pharaoh that they went in to their own demise. By faith, the wall of Jericho fell down after they had been encircled for 7 days. By faith, Rahab, the prostitute, did not perish with those who were disobedient because she had given a friendly welcome to the spies. Now we're in the early chapters of Joshua. Now the author says, kind of like Pastor does, towards the end of his message, and what more shall I say, for time would fail me. To tell of Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, David, Samuel, prophets. So we have judges, we have kings, we have prophets, who through faith conquered kingdoms, enforced justice, obtained promises, stopped the mouth of lions, quenched the power of fire, escaped the edge of the sword. Of course, the end of 33 and 34 is probably referring to the book of Daniel. Escaped the edge of the sword, were made strong out of weakness, became mighty in war, put foreign armies to flight. Women received back their children by resurrection. It's a story in Elijah. Some were, and then he says some were. Now, so far, it's not too bad. You live by faith and you always win, right? Even the Vikings can win by faith. So it's very positive. You can look at all of these blessings, all of these rewards that these people received because they went through, they lived out by faith. Okay, but now the author is also a realist, right? Some were tortured, refusing to accept release, so that they might rise again to a better life. Others suffered mockings and floggings and even chains and imprisonments. They were stoned, they were sawn in two, they were killed with the sword, they went about in skins of sheep and goats, destitute, afflicted, mistreated, of whom the world was not worthy. They were wandering about in deserts and mountains and in dens and caves of the earth. Now, so this is all the sad things, right? Some people live by faith, and they have to endure these sufferings, these hardships, these persecutions. And one thing that humankind is very good at is it's torturing other humans in unspeakable ways. And this has been going on since the history of mankind. This is going on since Genesis chapter 6, basically. Actually chapter 5. You start having this kind of violence recorded in the scriptures. And men who are in the military who go to places like Iraq and see today what's going on in the torture of one group of people against another. In the 90s, we had in Africa where one tribe was split up, or one location was split up in Rwanda, had two tribes, and one tribe just decided to massacre the other ones with machetes. Not even just shooting people with guns, but hacking them to death with machetes. In the 70s and what was going on in Vietnam. I mean, you can go all over the world, and there are places where people treat other human beings in unspeakable ways. But these people in particular that it was talking about here are those who are living out by faith and having to endure these things. Now, he said in chapter 10, if you recall, in verse 32, he said, remember your former days, after you were enlightened, you endured hard struggle with sufferings, sometimes being publicly exposed to reproach and affliction, sometimes being partnered with those so treated, so guilt by association. You had compassion on those in prison, and you joyfully accepted the plundering of your own property, because you knew yourself had a better possession and an abiding one. Some of them had endured affliction and suffering. And so when he talks about this group of people, the people he's talking to understand that as well. By faith, we live through those things. Why? Because what God has said is true. That's why we can live through those things. We don't question his goodness. We don't question whether he's all-powerful. We don't question whether he loves us. We know from passages like Romans 8 that there is nothing that can separate us from the love of God. We have these promises and this sure word of faith that God has given to us in his word that he'll never break. And it doesn't matter how hard life gets, or what comes at us, or what comes our way, whether it's a hurricane, or an earthquake, or troubles in our family that can hurt us deeply. Doesn't matter what those things are. God is still working in the world, and he's still working through us, and we accept what he says in his word by faith. And it's a conviction. If we remember back to verse 1, the conviction of things not seen. So he says in verse 39, all these things, though commended through their faith, all these people, though commended through their faith, did not receive what was promised in this life, since God had provided something better. Now notice he again twists it and applies it to us. Better for us. That apart from us, they should not be made perfect. In other words, we are part of them. We're all part of one large group. They suffered. They lived by faith. Some of them didn't suffer. Some of them did suffer. We live by faith. Some of us won't suffer, and some of us will suffer. But we're all part of the same group, and this was actually in, I think it's verse 3 of the Te Deum. Is your binder still here?
Yes.
Verse 3 of the Te Deum. There's a couple hymns that bring this out. And this one does it okay. There's another one that does it a little bit more on this passage in particular. But Holy God, we praise your name, is one of the oldest hymns that we have in Christianity, remaining from the early church. Verse 3, lo, the apostolic train. Now, don't let that scare you, the apostolic train, but it's all those from the apostolic era. So he talks about the apostolic train, the apostles, and those that followed the apostles. Okay, that's what he's talking about, not an apostolic succession. The apostolic train, join your sacred name to hallow. They praised Jesus Christ. The apostles praised Jesus Christ. Prophets swell the glad refrain. So those early prophets we've been reading about in 1 Corinthians 12 through 14. And the white-robed martyrs follow. The apostles, those who came after the apostles, those New Testament prophets, the martyrs, and from morn to the set of sun, so morning to evening, through the church, the song goes on. The faith goes on. We sing the song, The Faith of Our Fathers. But they live by faith. We live by the same faith, because it's the same faith and the same God who kept his promises to them, and he'll keep his promises to us. And we can have sure conviction of that, even if we can't see it, even if no one can prove it to us, even if someone mocks us for it, even if we're persecuted for it. Doesn't change, doesn't take it away from us, that we have this assurance in Christ, and we can live our Christian lives by faith. So, I hope that was encouraging. Anyone have any comments or questions? Pastor?
I am encouraged by Abraham's progress. you brought it up, but I'm encouraged by his progress. He did leave Ur incorrectly, but at a later point in his life, he did go all the way in his faith for the Lord. I'm encouraged by his progress.
Yeah, Abraham, the story of Abraham is encouraging. And what Pastor is saying, and I'm just saying it for the microphone, is that at the very beginning, Abraham wasn't sure what was going on. But by Genesis 22, Abraham is well convinced, and it's a progress. He grows and matures in his faith from Genesis 12 to Genesis 22, and we can see that, we can read that, and even look at our own lives and understand that even in our own lives. All right, well, if there's nothing else, Doug, would you like to close this in prayer?
Heavenly Father, thank you for this time that we could learn more about you. Just thankful that you provided out the way for salvation for us, and all we had to do is show faith in you for what you did for us. Pray that you just guide us throughout this week, and these things we